The eighth season of Thomas and Friends is usually criticized for its poor writing, ugly set design, and frequent bad characterization. It's part of the new series era, seasons 8 through 12, the first few seasons to be under the management of Hit Entertainment. Due to those reasons, it's considered one of the worst model seasons of the entire show. Personally, I think that couldn't be farther from the truth. I extremely disagree with that statement. In fact, I think it's one of my favorite seasons and has been underrated and secretly phenomenal the whole time. Now, I'm not just blinded by nostalgia. I do have some genuinely valid reasons as to why I like this season so much. The first of which being the incredible episodes in its catalog. And the first episode I'm going to talk about is Thomas Saves the Day.
It was a glorious summer day on the island of Sodor. Toby was collecting milk from the dairy.
Yeah, we could work on the title. It's a bit unoriginal. I think I've seen it before, just can't place it where. And it's also pretty vague since half the episodes in the whole show could be called that. Regardless of its lackluster title, it's still a fantastically written episode. The episode starts out with Thomas pulling Annie and Clarabelle along his branch line. He comes across a difficult bend and gets worried. The coaches, Annie and Clarabelle, tell him to slow down, which he does. This is not only a great and unique concept, it's also some fun character dynamics. Annie and Clarabelle are perfectly utilized as actual characters here, with a real relevance to the story and actually affect the plot in a pretty major way. In fact, this might be the most relevance they've had in the series up until now. I don't think there's ever really been an episode before Thomas Saves the Day that's used them as actual characters, that's given them speaking roles other than "slow down, Thomas," or, the generic dialogue that they normally say. This is exactly what great episodes do. They shed the spotlight on background characters that rarely speak and give them a chance to shine and show them off. Later on in the story, a line of runaway trucks is headed straight towards a newly constructed station. With some quick thinking and careful maneuvering around the difficult bend, Thomas is able to warn a signalman and save the day. Not only is this crash phenomenal and just absolutely action-packed, one of the best in Season 8, mind you. The 7-minute runtime instead of the classic series 4.5-minute runtime is also used to its advantage in this episode. At 4.5 minutes, they could have ended the episode when Thomas crashed and he learned a lesson. Instead, they decided to go the extra mile and add in this phenomenal action sequence that's extremely suspenseful, great music, great camera angles, and a very memorable, iconic crash. Overall, I give this episode a perfect score of 10 out of 10. Gordon Takes Charge is the next episode that I simply must talk about. I love this episode for two reasons. Number one, the characters, and number two, the plot. So let me explain in detail what I like about those aspects. Both Gordon and Percy act within their original personalities. Gordon is boastful, prideful, and short-tempered. The fact that he relishes in showing off to Percy and being superior to them is definitely in character of him. Making him a wise, kind mentor just wouldn't make any sense, so I'm glad they went this route and stayed true to his personality. And Percy doesn't let Gordon push him around, and he instead stands up for himself. He gets angry, he gets fed up, he starts shouting insults at him. And I'm glad that this episode didn't make him a whiny pushover who does nothing but complain. Like, he acts as he did in Season 5, which I think is the best season he was portrayed in. I miss him being short-tempered. I hate what they have made him in the modern series.
"All right, then, Arsdale End. That's my home," replied Toby. "That's why I like it, especially when you're there and not here saying I'm silly. Good night."
The core of this episode is Percy and Gordon's dynamic. These two characters have interacted many times before, but this is the first episode that truly expounds upon their relationship. They complement each other beautifully, as both of them learn a lesson from each other. Percy, obviously, learns how to pull coaches and, handle passengers better. And Gordon learns how to not be so cocky and show off from Percy. Both of these characters make major contributions to each other's arc, which really adds some complexity to the story. It's not just one person having to learn a lesson, it's both. Gordon and Percy both gain something from their experience. They both are bettered by each other, and that's what really makes them complement each other and makes me want to see more of their dynamic focused on in other episodes. Now, on to the plot. The story and how it's structured is pretty simple and formulaic. It follows the three strikes pattern, where Gordon shows Percy how to do something and shows off twice. Then, when he does it the third time, he makes a mistake, normally resulting in a crash, and he learns a lesson. It's repeated and used quite frequently in seasons 8 through 16, which makes it very predictable and annoying. Fortunately, this episode is able to use that predictability to its advantage and actually makes it very enjoyable to watch. One of the few Miller-era episodes that actually does this and makes the formula not annoying and boring to sit through. One final thing I'd like to add is the atmosphere and overall setting of this episode. Saying that Sodor looks beautiful with snow is like saying that water is wet. It's very redundant to say. Regardless, it's still worth mentioning, as these are just some top-notch visuals. I mean, look at the snow. It's beautiful. I wish it snowed more where I live because this looks just gorgeous. This episode scores a perfect score of 10 out of 10. Season 8 brought many new changes to the show, and one of them was an extended runtime of episodes. Instead of being 4.5 minutes like in seasons 1 through 7, it was now 7 minutes. Now, while this change did result in many episodes feeling slowly paced and repetitive, it also worked in its favor.
The island of Sodor is a busy...
Enter Fish. In this episode, Thomas is assigned to take some fish down to the docks. He is ordered to take only a few trucks at a time, because if he takes too many, he'll probably get in an accident. Naturally, Thomas does not appreciate this idea and has a deep disdain for fish, so he takes the entire load in order to make his job go by faster and do it all in one trip. In classic Thomas fashion, he crashes and learns a lesson. Now, the lesson in particular really resonated with me and stuck out with me because I've heard it many times before, especially when I was a lot younger, and it can really be applied to any situation, and that is the lazy person works the hardest. Essentially, what it means is that if you try to cut corners, take shortcuts, just be lazy and not do your job well, then you can make a mistake and fail. If that happens, you have to fix that mistake, and you end up spending more time than if you would have just done the job as you were instructed to, which is exactly what Thomas does. It's a beautiful thing, truly, that an episode of Thomas and Friends was able to resonate with me on a personal level, and I applaud, I commend that episode for being able to do that, because I don't think any other TV show has really been able to give me that same reaction that this episode did. This episode also utilizes two background characters, Salty and Arthur, very well, a duo which the fandom constantly pairs together. I don't think I've seen a single fan series that has not seen these two working together at the docks, which I think is a very cool idea. However, interestingly enough, these are the only major interactions that they get together in the entire show. And I think that's fantastic that this one simple interaction between the two characters is able to create a whole possibility for fans and so many headcanons. And that's great for this episode because it adds so much more story potential. Now, linking back to what I said earlier about how this episode uses its extended runtime to its advantage, the way it does this is after Thomas crashes, the episode could have ended right there, like a classic railway series story, very short, simple, a lesson learned at the end. However, it uses its extended runtime to create this very suspenseful scene where Thomas has to race back to the docks and get the fish delivered on time. And they add in just some absolutely gorgeous star-striking imagery with those sunsets in the sky. It's really beautiful. I have to commend the set designers for this episode because it really is just gorgeous. Naturally, due to all of these fantastic elements, this episode gets a perfect score of 10 points out of 10 points. Now it's time for my favorite episode of the entire season. I adore this episode. As a matter of fact, it's in my top 10 episodes of all time. I'm serious. It's that phenomenal. But what exactly makes this episode phenomenal? Well, if you were paying attention this entire time, you know that I'm about to break that down right now. The episode is called Halloween.
It was full steam ahead on the island of Sodor. All the engines were running on time.
Now, the idea of engines going to the smelter's yard and being terrified and being tricked by other engines into believing they're a ghost has been done multiple times before. I can think about at least 4 episodes where that happens, and that is Percy's ghostly trick, Thomas Percy and the Dragon, Duncan gets spooked, and Scaredy Engines. Fortunately, this episode is able to create its own identity and differentiate itself from those previous episodes. In fact, it ends up becoming better than all of those episodes, and in fact the scariest Thomas episode of all time. How does this episode do that exactly? One word: atmosphere. This episode creates such an uneasy, terrifying, unsettling tone and overall vibe that is unlike any of its predecessors. The music is fast-paced and makes your heart beat fast. It really captures the rush of adrenaline and your fight-or-flight response. The set design is also very just horrifying. Those red lights in the smelter's yard. The narration also elevates the intensity of this episode, and really just phenomenal performances by both Michael Angelis and Michael Brendan. This might be Michael Brendan's best performance as a narrator in his entire run on the show. He is able to invoke genuine terror and fear in his voice. I remember when I was watching this episode when I was a little kid, I would run away from the TV screen every time this part of the episode played because it was just so horrifying and really scary to me.
The ghost! It's got me! She steamed away as fast as her pistons could pump. Thomas thought Emily was the ghost, and he raced out of the smelting shed.
Now that is some remarkable voice acting. It really immerses yourself in the setting, and it's just scary. It's spooky. I don't know how to quite explain it. You just have to watch the episode for yourself in order to understand how terrifying it is. I find it very impressive that even after David Mitton and Britt Allcroft and all of these people who are working on the show before Season 8 left, the team working on it were still able to deliver on some scary moments, and it didn't just immediately become happy-go-lucky, kid-friendly, overly positive. It still had some dark elements that the previous seasons had, and I love that. This is the scariest Thomas episode ever, in my opinion. It succeeds in what it's trying to do and then goes above and beyond. Truly impressive and sets a precedent for how horror-based Thomas episodes should be. 10 out of 10 without doubt. You have to watch this episode. It's amazing. I'd also like to take a moment to address Emily's role in this season as a member of the main cast. She is a likable, charismatic, and, for the most part, consistently and well-written character. Has she had bad episodes? Certainly. No doubt about that. But every single character in the entire show has in this era of the show. No character was saved from poor writing. But if I'm being honest, it's a bit unfair to judge her solely on those poorly written episodes. It'd be like saying I talked about how Edward was a bad character and only used Edward Strikes Out as an example. You really have to look at the whole picture, and not just the bad episode she was in, but all of the good ones. Because if you watch the good episode she was in, she's actually a really great character. In Season 7, she was a kind-hearted individual who wanted to make new friends. However, all the engines despised her because of a misunderstanding. I learned from this character not to be afraid and to actually branch out and try to make new friends. And I think that that's a really great lesson. Not everyone wants to be your friend, but it's still worth asking and being kind to them regardless of how they treated you. And in Season 8, Emily was still that same kind individual. Sure, there were certain episodes where she was inconsistently portrayed and just a downright terrible person, such as Thomas, Emily, and the Snowplow, and Emily's Adventure. However, there were more episodes where she was in character. She was kind and had a deep empathy for others. In Emily's New Route, she laughed and smiled after learning that the Loch Ness Monster was simply just some seals. And in Chickens to School, she had an actual concern for Thomas and was worried about him. Overall, I think she's a very overhated character, and I'm glad that she was utilized more in this season. Moving forth, I'd like to discuss lighting and set design in this season. The lighting in this season is drastically different from seasons 6 and 7. In those seasons, the lighting was very flat, gray, dark. It wasn't very dynamic. In this season, a lot of scenes have a yellowish tint. It's also very noticeable when a different camera is used, like they attach it to one of the engines, and it just looks completely different. It's a bit inconsistent there, but it's okay. I don't mind it too much. I think this season also has some very dynamic camera angles. There are lots of long tracking shots, and the camera will like move around an engine side to side. I think that's very cool. I think this is one of the best shot seasons, not visually, but just how the camera moves around. Definitely an improvement from seasons 6 and 7 in terms of camera and lighting. The sets in this seasons are all around fantastic. As I mentioned before, a standout set is the Smelter's Yard. It is the best Smelter's Yard we've had in any Thomas season. In fact, it's one of the best sets in the entire model series. The lighting and just the mood it creates, it's really unsettling, and I love that. It's truly remarkable what they did with it. Also, the snow, as I mentioned before, is gorgeous. The sunsets, the sky, especially at night, beautiful. The new themes they use for the characters are fantastic. Particularly Gordon's, that's a standout. I love the tuba and how it's so bombastic and loud and really grabs your attention. And that perfectly captures Gordon as a character. I'm glad that his theme represents him so well. The other characters are also great. Edwards, love his theme. Very memorable. To conclude, Season 8 is severely underrated. With fantastically written episodes, fresh ideas, a likable cast of characters, and stunning visuals, it's more than worth a second viewing. I hope you decide to give it another chance after watching this video. Besides the episodes I've already mentioned, additional ones I would recommend watching are Thomas to the Rescue, James Gets a New Coat, Emily's New Route, Edward the Great, James Goes Too Far, and You Can Do It, Toby. Before I end this video, I would like to thank you all of you, every single one of you, for watching. You all are incredible, fantastic, phenomenal, amazing, spectacular human beings that truly do matter and mean a lot to me. Thank you for helping me follow this dream of mine and share my love of this show. Have a lovely day, everyone, and please stay safe.